That's going to come out really well on DATV and a very fresh mouth.
It's definitely something that we need to review further.
Okay, I would like to call to order a regular meeting of the Board of Education, June 21st, 2016, at 7 o'clock p.m. Kathy, could you please call the roll?
Brinkley.
Yes.
Dryden. Gephardt.
Here.
Block.
Here.
Lowe.
Here.
Stoops.
Here.
Tremble.
Here. Next, we're going to do the pledge. What did you lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, tonight there are two opportunities for the public to address the board. At this time, we're going to enter into our public hearing regarding the intent to transfer money between funds. First, Tony Lacey, Chief Financial Officer, will provide information about the intent to transfer money between funds. After his update, we will hear public comment regarding the fund transfers. If anyone here wishes to address the board about a different topic, you'll have an opportunity to present general comments after the public hearing.
So, as you are aware, when the Board of Education approved the track and field improvements at Batavia High School, that approval necessitated moving money around in the district's funds and the amendment of the district's budget to fund that project. The board held a public hearing for the budget amendment at the last meeting, I believe it was June 7th. Before we actually move the money between funds, we also need to hold a public hearing for that. In terms of moving money between funds, I'll just simply list off the amount of money from the fund that it's coming and to the fund that it's going, just to give an understanding of what we're attempting to do here. The resolutions presented before the board today would move $100,000 from the transportation fund to the operations and maintenance fund. It would move $155,146.23 from the student activity fund to the operations and maintenance fund. It would move $300,000 from the working cash fund to the capital projects fund. And it would move $600,000 from the operations and maintenance fund to the capital projects fund. So this would put a total of $900,000 in the capital projects fund. With the addition of the $200,000 that the Batavia boosters donated, this would put $1.1 million in the capital projects fund. In the FY17 budget, we would move another $400,000 from the operations and maintenance fund to pay toward the track specifically, as that was the capital project there. And then in the future, as you notice here too, we are moving $300,000 from the working cash fund to capital projects. That's essentially the loan, the promise that the boosters made, and that's their remaining balance. And as that money came in, expected to be $60,000 a year for 5 years, we would put that money back into the working cash fund. That's a summary of the fund transfers. Are there any questions?
We'll have a second opportunity to discuss it if we need to before we actually take action.
Yes.
All right, then I'm just going to jump ahead. I don't see anyone here to comment during the public hearing, and we don't have anyone here to make public comments tonight. So we're going to, we don't have any media partners, so it's a quiet meeting tonight.
So you do have to close the hearing.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, you're right. So that concludes our public hearing regarding the intent to transfer the money between funds. Thanks for that reminder, Tony. Then we'll just move right on.
Doesn't it require a vote?
A roll call.
A roll call on what?
Close the hearing.
Oh, I apologize. My script just says we're closing the hearing.
That was my recollection, but I could be wrong.
Oh, okay. But we can do it now. So am I entertaining a motion or am I?
To close the hearing.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Stoops, second by Gaspar. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Stoops.
Yes.
Brinkley.
Yes.
Gephardt.
Yes.
Block.
Yes.
Lowe.
Yes.
Tremble.
Yes. Okay, now good. We move on to consent agenda. So our next item is our consent agenda. Consent agenda is a method of streamlining meetings by taking one vote on a number of routine personnel and business items. And each of the items is detailed in the agenda and has been appropriately posted in the board packets. Mr. Pierce, would you please read the consent agenda?
Absolutely. 5.1 through 5.4 is the approval of various
Regular, special, and closed session meeting minutes from May 24th, June 7th, and June 11th of 2016. 5.5 is our personnel report. 5.6 is our payroll and bills. 5.7 is our donations. I'd like to highlight those. Target has donated $598.05 to RMS for various programming. Chipin has donated $3,600 to support 2 of our Title I schools with additional Chromebooks for paraprofessionals in order to assist students. The St. Charles American Legion Post 342 donated $330 for expenses in the creation of a King County Veterans Virtual Memorial during a social studies class with Mrs. Schaefer's class. And then lastly, Kim Perlman has made a donation approximately valued at $3,000 for use in the music practice room at VHS. 5.8 is destruction of closed session minutes from December 9, 2014. 5.9 is our prevailing wage act notice, which is done annually. 5.10 is the recertification of hazardous areas for busing. 5.11 is the approval of our annual curriculum contracts, which includes NWEA and IXL. 5.12 is the approval of the K through 12 PE and art curriculum, and 5.13 is the approval of our 16-17 parent-student handbooks. And our last agenda item is the 5.14 approval of this consent agenda.
So did,
Yes, and I don't know if we said this.
It's added.
It's corrected online, yes.
You want to
In
change
the personnel
that?
report, we added 2, and I believe you're notified of that.
Yes, we're notified of that. So are there any items on the consent agenda for board clarification or removal? Or even questions on that? Did any of our hazardous routes change from this? It didn't look like it, but I wasn't sure. All right, then if there are no questions, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Is that you, Tina? Yes. Moved by Blakely, second by Locke. Kip, would you please call the roll?
Blakely.
Yes.
Gephardt.
Yes.
Locke.
Yes.
Lowe.
Yes.
Stute.
Yes.
Dremel.
Yes. Next, we'll be moving on to the reports portion of our meeting. We will start with the treasurer report.
So the treasury report is something that you see every month, and if you have any questions, this will be your opportunity to ask. It is routine. I will move on to the Arboretum update. So back in October, we've been meeting with a group that is interested in making sure that the Arboretum, while it is on our campus, it looks nice and is kept up, and really has volunteered, and we're grateful to them to do that work. They did want to have a sign memorializing the trees that were dedicated in the honor of students who had passed away or community members that had passed away. So that's what you see before you, is that they had 3 people donate some money towards that sign, so they're up to $500. And so they're about 2/3 of the way to purchasing that sign. But they did want to install that sign before the ground freezes. So there's some, upfront time where they need to order that. So I just they wanted to show you what it looked like, and I would actually ask you to accept the donation at the next meeting, but I wanted to make sure that you were okay with that sign. And then there's one additional piece about a bench, but let's just talk about the sign first. So you see the picture of it there. It's 18 by 24 inches, and it would have the names of the people to whom the trees are memorializing.
Did they work off of that original list?
They did.
That's what I assumed.
And there was a brochure as well. There was an initial dedication to the Arboretum, and there was a handout, a pamphlet, and so they double checked it with the chart that we have plus that pamphlet.
So then essentially, what they're doing here with the in memory of is the whole Arboretum is in memory of all these people. So we're not having the specific, this is, Bill Burke's tree type thing. Okay.
Because it was too hard to figure out from the records whose tree belonged to whom. And also, some of the trees aren't there anymore, and the trees are still, some of them are not in good shape, so.
Right. Well, I think that's a good, did they come up with that idea? then I'm more than pleased with that, because I know there was a lot of concern about having to remove certain trees and having those trees be, centralized to one figure, but having this being the whole arboretum is,
Can names be added to this?
Well, that was the original dedication, so.
Okay, so this is
Right.
just the way it is,
Because we wouldn't be
okay.
accepting any donations to new trees.
Okay, no.
It looks nice.
Yeah.
Are they doing a rededication ceremony?
There were, I believe the plans that they gave you in October, they had some ideas about that. So they're really taking the lead on that, and I think that, right, they did not give me any more information. So are you guys okay with me bringing that back in?
If they're happy,
Yeah,
then
yeah, exactly, I would agree.
Right?
fight that battle.
And then there is also the donation of a bench, and that one of the families is interested in donating a bench. And so we hadn't brought that up previously. I know I do have concerns that when we put benches out on our property, that somebody has to upkeep them and they don't last forever. And so I did make sure that I was clear on that it's not something that at some point the bench will be usable or safe, and we'll have to get rid of that bench. And so they had to come up with a way to secure it, and so that was,
So is the bench our responsibility then?
no, I would not, I said that we would not upkeep that or install it.
Is it a permanent feature? So it can't be vandalized like by removal or anything like that, or?
Well, I said that I would get your, just your go-ahead on it if you think that's an okay idea. So this is a good time for me for you guys to tell me those things now. So
Where do you think the bench is going to be? Because they do practice out there and we have parents that sit up. I mean, it's not going to be in the way of a practice field, is it?
it would be inside the arboretum.
Inside the arboretum. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we'll make sure that it's not in the way of the facilities that are being used. And now they will be carried off. Now they will be carried off.
And I think you made it very clear that we won't upkeep it, and that if it deteriorates, or if the arboretum,
Right, if at some point, I know this board has said that they definitely don't want to see that arboretum going away anytime soon, but that in the future, that we don't want to tie them into the future board. Right. So that's why I'm in charge of the design and exactly for that.
yeah, I think that's a good.
Was there any other status from their previous conversation with Davy trees or anything about the trees and all that being brought to us before?
Right, there were plans to identify the species of the tree and to do some upkeep of the trees and show people how to plant trees properly, and there hasn't been any decisions about that.
And same with pruning or anything like that, so they,
This is all, that's the whole
only thing
discussion
that
right
they
now.
brought in. Okay.
Tablet and then the possible bench.
So they haven't actually done any of the maintenance yet? Do we want them to do the maintenance before they're putting signs up and benches?
So what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, I thought they were going to go in there and make sure that the trees are healthy and prune them up and all that. Did they do that, or?
No, they haven't done any work in that.
Okay.
I don't think there was any concern there was a hazard.
Oh, no, I wasn't worried about it being a hazard, but it seems kind of odd that we would put in a nice new sign, and if the arboretum is looking overgrown or anything of that sort, and that was what I thought was their original concern.
Yeah, their original concern was that they didn't want the arboretum to go away. And
Okay.
this was an opportunity just to continue memorializing the value and the history of the arboretum.
Okay.
Thank you.
Strategic planning updates.
Yeah, both, that's fine. So we did have a board meeting where we reviewed the strategic plan, and the board came up with some, we talked about how the board could come up with priorities, so we just wanted to have that at a regularly scheduled meeting, just that follow-up discussion. We also wanted to bring Mr. Dryden up to speed, since he was unable to attend that meeting, but he's not here tonight, so we might need to put off part of the discussion. But I do know that there were two pieces that we were prepared to talk about. One of them was, I wanted to make mention that the board did say that they wanted more information on full-day kindergarten at that meeting that was a priority, but that you did want us to bring you back information about, you're interested in hearing about a pay-for-service model. So having a fee for families to have all day kindergarten. So we want to make sure that we said that here so people can be up to speed on that conversation. And another topic that we talked about is alternative learning opportunities for at-risk students at the high school. And so I thought that this would be a good time to talk about, the board mentioned that as something that they'd like to hear a little bit more about, and the high school has been really investigating that as well. So Dr. Smith is here from the high school, and Dr. Newkirk has been very involved as well.
Sure, the Board of Education is most familiar with our most severe discipline incidents, so drug use, some issues with violence occasionally, but most likely drug use. That's actually 0.58% of all of the office discipline referrals, so a very, very small fraction of the office discipline referrals that happen at our high school. If you look at the more frequent office discipline referrals that are happening and being dealt with at the high school, 20% of office discipline referrals happen because kids didn't serve their previous consequences. 45% of office discipline referrals result from truancy issues. Another 15% are tardiness issues. So the vast majority of the discipline that's happening at the high school are issues which, as we've talked through and processed with the high school, result in school just not working for some of our kids. And the systems that we have in place to help promote good attendance, to promote truancy, to get kids to serve their consequences, just don't work for all kids. So as we looked, and I think for many years we've tried to kind of fit kids into the mold of school, we realized that we really need to make some adjustments to make school work for our students. And we started looking at what options are available to schools and high schools and what are best practices, and looking at how can we adjust so that our kids are more successful. And we're talking about a small portion of our population, but it's not working. And the consequences that we're currently offering are not working, and the structures that we have in place are not working for these kids. So as we look to explore, we looked at the Alternative Learning Opportunities Program through the state of Illinois, which is an application process. So we've worked looking at the ROE as a resource. So the Regional Office of Education is our partner with this. And we've looked at West Aurora School District, Oak Park, and we've researched what our best practices and kind of what adaptations we can make so that students are more set up for success within our environment. And so we put together a proposal. The proposal is basically a framework for what this would look like at our school, and it really is an alternative learning program. The day is offset. There's more intensive support services that are provided to students. It's a different way of approaching high school education for students that we're just not reaching right now. So we submitted an application to the state of Illinois with our partner, the ROE, and they would be an agent within this. And we have some kind of back channel, not official approval of that application yet. Once it's finally approved, we'll give that application to the Board of Education to consider. We see this as an opportunity to look at school differently and to reimagine high school for a small group of students that we think could be more successful if we made some accommodations and provided adequate supports to them. So we see this as a huge opportunity. It would require board action because you would enter into an intergovernmental agreement with the Regional Office of Education, which basically says we're partners in this. So as kids get put into this program, the ROE is at the table with us. They have someone who works exclusively with alternative programming, and they would be at the table with us deciding who goes in. Our program right now is looking at those students who have multiple issues, but this is not for our most severe students. This is for students who may be internalized, they school avoid, they have truancy issues, they may have substance use issues, they're at risk of academic failure as well. So they have multiple issues that we're trying to work with, and we believe that having kind of wraparound services for students and engaging them in a different way will set them up for success. So we don't have official approval, so I don't have an application to share with you, but I wanted to tell you a little bit more about why we started thinking about this and kind of what those next steps would be. So in July, potentially, once you get that official approval from the state of Illinois, we would share the application so you can read more deeply at the approach that we took, but it's based on what other districts are doing and what best practice is in this area of alternative learning. So we would go through a process of beginning the program. It would start officially with our school calendar, it would follow our school calendar, but we probably wouldn't have students transferred into that program from our current program, our traditional program, until probably November. We need time to engage our staff, we need time to identify students, we need time to make sure that the appropriate supports are in place, the curriculum's in place for students, so that they're most set up for success. So while we would love to offer this great opportunity to students, from day one, we really feel we need time to engage our staff in that process and make sure things are set up. So the program would officially, if the board approves it, would start August 17th with school, but we wouldn't start transferring students into the program until probably about 6 to 9 weeks into the school year.
So with an alternative learning opportunity program in place, is there like I know we probably still have to provide our core studies that we have to by law, but is there like any type of different grading scale or, like classroom behaviors and such? I think it's a great program. I just kind of want to understand what this program might look like from the inside.
Yeah, it would be offset, so students would not be starting at 7:35 with our regular school schedule. We see that as often a barrier, so we have this offset schedule that students have. They would have embedded services within the school day, social work, drug and alcohol consent, those types of services would be embedded within their school day. Each student comes to the table with an individual plan about what they need. Some students just need a little bit of a boost to get back. They might need some of these services. They're dealing with life events at their home or within the community that they need support with. So their services are going to look very different than a student who, this is something that they really need. There are different plans. So it does flex based on the needs of the student. Some students will be more intensive. They might be exclusively within this program. Some students might be accessing traditional classes with their regular grade level peers, but then also being a part of this program. So it is flexible. So each kid, that's part of why it's going to take us about 6 weeks to enroll students into the program, is that you have to have a team of people that meet to talk about what is their individual success plan going to look like. So it's very individualized for students. So we're trying to get out of the system where it kind of says this is a one-size-fits-all and really make it much more customized for students that need that.
This would be based at the high school?
Yes.
And only for high school kids?
Currently, it would be only for high school students.
And so the individualized instruction, in some cases, they would be able to go outside the classroom, go to a class, but the majority of it would be in, or would, again, that's hard to be kind.
Yeah, it's going to depend. So typically how some of these programs typically work is you start out a little bit more restricted, and as students show you they're ready to access less structured environments, then they kind of earn those privileges to mainstream with other students. You may have students that are college bound, they need hands-on science classes. That's a requirement for college. They need to access those, but they have to have that within their plan about accessing and make sure that the supports are there for them.
So this is only for Batavia students. We're not bringing any students in from other districts.
So this program would be open to all students, regardless of disability. There's equity pieces that are within this, so just because a student in special education doesn't exclude them from accessing this as well. It's open to all students. So we have a set of criteria, and we have a team of people that will meet to extend those invitations and work with families to develop success plans.
So would we oversee this, or how are we overseeing?
We're jointly working on this, so this would be a joint venture between the ROE and Batavia Public Schools.
And each student would have, and I don't want to use the term like IEP, but they would have their own individualized learning plan, basically, that,
And when I'm able to share the application with you, you'll see what that success plan
Okay.
looks like, and there are goals in there about what we want
okay.
students to
So we just
achieve,
don't
and-
put them in there and,
Yeah, you don't make it up. You're going in with a very clear picture as a parent and as a student of what this program's going to look like for you.
Do we have any idea on actual numbers, or is there going to be like a cap?
In looking at our current evaluation criteria and in looking at, with our partner, the ROE, we have identified approximately 30 students that we feel would meet that criteria, but we have to refine that criteria as we talk to our staff, because that's really, we did a lot of work very quickly last year to even get the application in, which was due June 1st, and now we'll take the time with our staff to make sure that we're looking at the right kids, we'll work with the ROE, extend those invitations, and then work on those success plans.
What type of cost are we looking at?
This would be an additional staff member and paraprofessional that would be needed to have this program. The Board of Education, because we're very local, we're driven by local wealth here and local property taxes. This would be funded by local taxpayers and learners. And as part of the ALOP application is that general state aid for the following year, you could claim the full foundation level.
So I was going to ask, is there some kind of a reimbursement of some sort?
But it would be in arrears.
In that,
Yeah.
but we would have to do the upfront costs. Okay. Would it depend on the number of students in there?
Yep, because it's based on their attendance in that program. So by us starting a little bit later, it's going to reduce that amount of money, but we feel that that's what's best for kids in terms of getting the program right for students, so that it's all set up for them. There is some cost to this for the Board of Education. There are going to be several points for the board to say, well, we can't do this, and that's strategically set up as your budget becomes more clear, so that the board can make decisions about funding this program for this year with that expectation of the full foundation formula in arrears. So kind of the first step would be for the board to see and read through the application, and as soon as I have, and I expect that, I have expected it for the past couple of days, but for the board to see that application, have time to look through that and ask us questions. In the July meeting, potentially, based on what the state says, there would be a potential of an intergovernmental agreement between the Regional Office of Education and the Batavia Public Schools. And that would be like the first step, saying we're going to partner on this. It doesn't commit you to putting kids in that program. It doesn't commit you to funding a teacher for that program, but it just says we need to explore this. So that July meeting, the board will have an opportunity to say, this is something that we feel, we should continue to plan and look towards, or they can put the brakes on at that time. And then there will be other pieces along the way as we get closer to enrolling students, where the board obviously is going to have to fund a staff member, and that comes before the Board of Education. So there are different points where the board can say, not yet, or we need to wait on this, but we kind of wanted to talk about it tonight, to hear what your questions are, to see, we'd like to continue to plan in the vein that we're going to do this, but there will be opportunities for the board to say, not now.
You said you talked to West Aurora and Old Park.
Yes.
What's been their, let's say, success rate, would you say?
That I don't know, because I wasn't in direct contact with them.
Just need to get it right?
I don't have the actual statistics, but over the years, like Oak Park has done this program for a number of years, where now they have 3 ALOP programs running at the same time with different populations of students, and they reported great success because they've been doing it for so long. They kind of have it as a well-oiled machine. And same with West Aurora, they not quite as extensive with their programming, but they found great success with students that were maybe not fitting in the traditional mold.
Well, anything new is going to take time, but I mean, it seems like we haven't had great success sending our kids out to some places.
Right.
And I'm just looking at
different
it
options.
to try something different. And it might cost, but maybe in the long run,
it'll be less.
it might be beneficial. So that's why I was just curious on and how successful or how, what type of kids they have that we would put in also to make
You
it
said
work.
they had 3 different populations, and I'm sorry, what populations are you talking about?
So at Oak Park, they have 3 different ALET programs running at the same time. It's just different populations of students. One population focused more on the attendance and truancy issues, where another one focused maybe on school anxiety types of issues. They had 3 different areas of focus. And so three different applications that they did each time to.
Okay, and
So this
so,
would be an annual, we'd have to renew this annually with the state.
so when you apply with a particular focus in mind? And what,
So you identify, we're looking
What
at
did-
students with multiple risk factors.
okay, so
We
just
see
in
them as
general?
our most difficult students. And someone said, well, it might save in the long run. That's exactly our thinking. And as we've talked about how to best serve kids, we're serving these kids anyways. These are kids that take a lot of staff time,
Right.
a lot of administration time, a lot of teacher time. Sometimes they're disruptive in their classes. Sometimes, they're not in their classes at all. So that connection's never there for some of these kids. So we're serving these kids. We're just not doing a great job at it, which is why we want to take this different approach.
Brad, what is the thought on our highest risk students? Because I know this is not our high risk. So, and I know the plan is maybe not to use Safe School anymore. Would this school allow our high risk students to be a part of, or not? Is that?
We wanted to set this program up. We could, after we see success with this, start to target, as Oak Park did, different populations. We feel that if we can catch this group of students before multiple failures in school, before they've not been there for 60% of the time, where they're disconnected, and those are the students that become some of our most heavy hitters, where the board is actually getting to know those kids through that expulsion process, which we don't want. So we're trying to catch them before those behaviors become so serious that they can't really function in our school environment. So we want to see success with this intervention, and then hopefully based on the success, we can layer on additional interventions for kids, because kids are facing different issues.
And we're seeing a rise in the mental health and anxiety and drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
And so this is something.
Some of the causes and
We need to
consequences
address.
of mental illness and anxiety we're seeing in our schools. So
Right.
kids are having trouble kind of fitting that traditional mold. I talked about that 7:30. That doesn't work for a kid who's been up all night worrying
Right.
about something to start school at 7:30 in the morning. So we're looking at a different approach and targeting their specific needs within this program.
Would that change any kind of requirements for graduation?
No, they would still fulfill all the graduation requirements, and as part of the application, there's a minimum of 5 clock hours of in-school time as well.
Okay, I was just thinking of certain classes that if they're inside here, they can't go to that class. Of a certain thing, that's,
Yeah.
I was just asking.
Some students would access traditional classes, but some of the curriculum would be delivered online.
Okay, all right.
With the support of the teacher.
With
I
the,
really value how student-centered that is. I think traditionally the world has been, we count these kids into the form that we need them to be counted into. And I really, really value that everything you bring to us is focused on how can we help our students succeed. And I really appreciate John saying that really in the long term, which, yes, it's about money, but it's really not about money, it's about helping kids succeed. But the reality is we are expending resources. So let's expend resources in a way that's really beneficial and give these kids a chance to go out in the world and have successful lives instead of really struggling. So thank you guys very much for always looking at what we can support our students. Didn't interrupt your question.
no worries. Is the success of the program have anything to do with the level of reimbursement that we would get the following year? In other words, is it, if we have 30 students in the program, do they have to attend a certain number of days? And I mean,
Yeah, they're just like our traditional students. They calculate, general aid for that program based on their attendance. So, while money is never, the objective of that, but we want kids attending. And many of the kids, one of their risk factors is truancy. So we need to get them there and participating, and that's one of the goals of the program.
For this program, for me, I think the word success is also, it's a pretty tricky word because your success is going to be measured so much differently than you're going to measure against one of, I don't want to say a normal student, but our regular mainstream traditional students. Success is a tricky word here, and I don't want our board to look at success as they all graduated with honors. That's not what I went to college. That's not going to be the success of this program. This is
Well, they'll have
measured
individual
quite
goals, and if
differently.
they meet their goals.
Right.
Maybe career planning it's one of the sections of the student success plan because they may not be college bound. They might be, but they may not be. And making sure that they have career goals and aspirations. You can more specifically target what their career needs are.
Or just making sure they show up to school every day is a success.
That's a life skill.
17th grade, you have a kid who misses 120 days of school traditionally, getting them there to only miss 60, that's a huge success. But so success will be measured by those success plans that are set up for each student.
This is something than how we're assessing our regular students. It's how are they growing? How are they
Growth.
right? How are they improving? And so it's a consistent philosophy.
Yeah.
So things you'll expect from me, just to recap, you'll see the application as soon as it's approved by the state agency. And then in July, the potential for an intergovernmental agreement, which would continue that planning process for this. And then there would be a couple of other checkpoints that we would bring to you to check back as the budget clarifies and expenditures clarify, revenues clarify, that the board can weigh those options in terms of programming versus the expense that the board would incur. So it's kind of set up that way so that the board has multiple opportunities to revisit this.
Do you think, you haven't heard yet, and I know it probably takes time and all that, but do you think part of it is what's going on in Springfield with no budget and all, they're trying to hold back on anything?
I don't think so. The state has always been good at like two pieces. One is funding this, and then the other piece is career and technical education. They seem to always fund those pieces, which we really appreciate, because those are super expensive programs that we run, and without that support, it would be very difficult to maintain some of our programs. But I feel like those two pieces, they've always been pretty good about funding. And we've not heard anything on the horizon about them not funding these alternatives.
It says that another state's really good at approving things and just not actually check for it. Any other questions on that?
Thank you, Brad.
No, that's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
That's awesome.
Joanne.
Any policy?
And policy, we are going to turn that back over to Brad as well. There's
Awesome.
one update.
There is an update to a student athlete concussion and head injury board procedure or board policy and then the procedure. And the main thing that has changed, you kind of see this almost every year now as things have changed in terms of regulations, but this is based on the press recommendation. And the newest piece is the concussion oversight team. So there is a team that's required in school code, and you can see it there both in your policy and your procedure. There's a team that's required, and the legislation is very specific on who to be on that team. But they would oversee the concussion management program and return to play for students that experience concussions. So Dave Andrews has been working with Lori Carbonell, our district nurse, trying to find a position that would serve on the concussion oversight team. So I can't say that this is fully up and running at this second, but they are working in this direction so that we're compliant with school code related to the concussion oversight team.
Is there any type of liability for that position that the state put in to safeguard them?
That I don't know. We have, the only thing that I can think that's akin to it is we have a physician who writes us a prescription for, I'm going to say EpiPens because I don't know, auto injectors for allergies. I guess that's the generic term. EpiPen is the brand name. But that physician is covered. They don't have any liability for writing us that prescription for their use. But you know, that is probably a concern for a physician that would be on this team. But I don't know the answer to that, but I'll look into that.
Thank you. I mean, I had talked to Lisa that I just wanted, I mean, I like this, I just don't want a family doctor just to say it's okay to go ahead and then it doesn't go against the team and then all of a sudden we're in trouble for doing that. So I do like, but when I was going over it after I talked to Lisa about it, that struck me as the liability on the physician, because maybe that's why some of them aren't jumping
to
you know.
join.
I would think that in this case, the Governmental Tort and Liability Act would apply.
I would hope.
So I'm sure it has to, because they'd be
Okay.
acting as an agent of the school district. And so
Okay.
unless there was something egregious, wanton conduct, like massive negligence, they're going to be covered.
Okay,
So,
just to be safe.
out of curiosity, does this only cover concussions that happen in school or within a school activity?
Yeah.
If a child gets a concussion, say playing club soccer or something, brings a note to school saying, hey, I had a concussion, they're out for a while, does that automatically cause the concussion protocol committee to?
No, that would be a different set of procedures. Most often that becomes a 504 for students because they could have certain accommodations that would be needed to access their education. So most often that gets directed in a different direction. This would be for that extracurricular activity piece.
Okay.
But that does happen where kids in outside sport, they suffer concussion. Sometimes those things are months and months of healing and repair, and the school works through the 504 team to make accommodations so that they can access their education.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the kid who wants to get back into it and, gets clearance from their doctor, but may not be ready to come back and puts themselves in harm's way, whether or not we have any say in, make sure you can pass our test.
I think, physicians in those circumstances be much more aware than in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a much broader awareness of concussion management out there, both in the medical community and in schools.
So that was the first reading. If you guys have any suggestions or alterations, even though this one is from press, then just let us know. Otherwise, we'll bring it back for second reading and adoption next month.
Sounds good. Next, moving on to the action portion of our agenda. The first item is the transfer of money between funds. Mr. Lindsay.
So we covered in the public hearing the transfer of money between funds, so I won't recoup that. There are 5 resolutions that are there attached to that recommendation. The overall, we just by passing one motion, we call it all 5 resolutions, kind of like an omnibus measure. How about that? That would be executed. Is there any questions about the transfers that I can answer for you?
I had a long talk with Lisa yesterday, and I'm just stuck on the attachment on this, the inactive student activity fund part. That, on part of it I understand it, on part of it I disagree with, which is causing really concerns of how I'm going to vote on this, just because I look at some of these. First of all, I appreciate everything you've done to streamline this and to correct what's happened over years. But I think I know you said it was going to take months to a year to get rid of some of this stuff and to streamline it, but I just think we're taking money out of some activities that might still be active in some areas, maybe a little bit, and we're putting it into here, and yes, it's going to be funded for every student later on down the road. But just on how it's in principle on this, if we could vote on these all separately, vote mostly yes on some of the transfers, but this one I just have a hard time with taking the money out. So I'm just putting it out there on where I stand on this and why.
What specifically is your concern?
My specific concerns is if there's money in a, let's say, a club, and you're taking a percentage out to put into this area, this 155, to me, it should stay in that club. I can understand it when I first talked to Tony about this a while back, when this first came up. And my understanding was, if it was, let's say, the class of 1998 that had $2,000 in this fund, and now it's inactive, it hasn't been touched since 1998, I can understand that money now going into here.
So
But if something else is in another fund, a food club or something like that, I have a problem of taking 10% of it or keeping 10% behind, or whatever it was, and transferring it over here to clean it up and all that.
So
That's where I have it.
let me just clarify one thing, because I think I heard you say that we were taking a uniform percentage out of each account, and that's not the case. We're taking a uniform, or attempting to take a similar percentage out of each school's account overall, but the individual accounts, the principals and sponsors have looked at those individual accounts. In some cases, the numbers went up, although it's not typically the case, but in cases where there are active use, those numbers were left alone. In other cases where there was inactive accounts, those numbers were fully depleted and reduced to zero. So it isn't like we did an across-the-board cut on every account and we took, 20% out of each one. It was a case-by-case basis for literally every line item that you see here.
No, and I understand that. That's where Lisa and I had a talk on this, and she said that in some cases, someone might have come forward and said they were using it for something else, but in some cases, I'm not sure if that's really the case, and so I don't know why it can't stay there. So I just have a hard time with this, personally. So that's just me on this. So that's where I'm standing, and I don't want to drag this out. I'm probably going to vote no, but I'm just letting you know where my concern was on it.
Okay, James.
Oh, can I actually just ask a quick question? Because I understand your concern, and so let's just say there's a jump rope club at one of the schools, and they are one of the ones that we had targeted, and their account went away. They come back to us and say, hey, we had money in here, here's our account ledger. Is there a way that we can deal with that after the fact? I mean, we don't necessarily have to say, well, the money's gone. I would assume that there's something that we can do after the fact and go, all right, an error was made, we can fix it, and come up with whatever funds that they were.
None of this happened without conversations with building administrators.
Right.
Yeah.
There were many, many people involved.
And I'm confused. John has been told that this is, people have been gone through, administration has been gone through this, and they're good with what, they're telling you that this club no longer exists, the money's inactive, and you don't believe them?
I'm just saying, I don't like the process.
You may not like the process, but you don't believe what they're telling you. I know.
I don't like how it is being done. So I'm voicing my concern right now. And so I'm going to stick with my beliefs and my principle on this.
I think that's totally acceptable. I mean, I don't think we need to try to convince another board member who has a strongly held belief. I mean, I think that's okay.
No, but I guess.
And then just to be perfectly clear and transparent, I don't want to be disingenuous about this at all. There have been a lot of people involved in this, and not everybody's happy about it.
Right.
No, I
Okay.
understand
Process. So not everybody, we came to consensus on this in terms of what we're going to do, but I can't say there's universal agreement on this. So it's an unpleasant thing, it's a mess, and to unwind this, you can't make everybody happy.
So are we hoping that this does not happen as we move ahead in the future?
And just to be clear, we have plenty of work to clean up. This is not done. We're going to be cleaning this up over the course of the next year. And so what you see here, essentially most of it still has to be spent down over the course of the year, unless they have a very specific plan as to what they're doing with that money, why they're fundraising, and why they're carrying a balance. Because the premise of the whole student activity account is that you're raising money for a specific purpose, and then you're spending that money that you raised on that purpose. And we haven't necessarily had good procedures to ensure that folks are doing that. And I would say it's also very clear that we've been misusing student activity accounts, not in a fraudulent sense, but we have been pushing a lot of activity through these activity accounts that doesn't belong there to begin with. And much of this money that is in these accounts is the board's money. You know, the money that's in a student activity account is a fiduciary account, meaning it's held in trust by the Board of Education for students. And we've been running district business essentially, middle school things like revolving fund type activities through these accounts, and that's really the Board of Education's money. And it belongs on the Board of Education's books, their ledgers, and it should, those activities should be approved each month by the Board of Education. What goes on in a student activity account is held in trust. The Board of Education actually is the owner of the accounts. The treasurer is bonded to hold those accounts, but it's the students' money. So when the students ask for their money, we have to produce it immediately. Essentially, it's there.
So, for example, if a high school club or team or sport is fundraising for something, that's their money.
Yes.
But it should be for a specific purpose and specific plan. So the difficulty is often we raise money with no
And then it's gone into this
goal.
account, but never been used?
Right.
In some cases, yeah. And the high school is pretty good about maintaining their accounts. But other schools, especially elementary schools, in some cases, they haven't been, or money will have been raised and will sit in these accounts for years.
How did it get like this? Too many, how?
It's just not good clarity on procedures and regulations.
Right, and misunderstandings of the purposes and.
So if I'm reading this spreadsheet correctly, then, like if it's showing a negative on the net side, essentially does that mean we were zeroing out their account if it was a negative on the original balance side?
There are some cases where we still have some work to do, where there are accounts that are in the negative, and then there are accounts in the same school essentially that are in the positive, and those in some cases don't fully offset. And so we're going to have to reconcile those over the course of the next year. Because we owe money to particular student activity students, and yet the overall account, the miscellaneous account for that school is essentially overdrawn, which that should not happen.
Right, that's what the negative that you see, that
Right.
being overdrawn. And if it's in the right-hand column, that means you haven't fixed it yet.
Okay, so we haven't fixed like this Grace McWayne kindergarten.
Correct. The middle column shows what we actually adjusted. Or what, the middle column shows what they're left with. And the right column shows the adjustments.
I see.
So it's been a very, I would say, a tedious process, and I asked a lot of the principals, and I put them in a very precarious position because they had to go and kind of scrap with folks for dollars, and that was what the situation requires, and I appreciate them doing that. We've got some more cleanup to do in the future over the course of the next year, but the reality is that this hasn't been managed well. There's no clean exit strategy, but we're not taking money from folks. A classic example is in some cases, for example, the PTO would give the school cash, the school would take that cash and put it in the student activity accounts, and then kind of pluck money from those activity accounts is however they decided to spend that cash. And the reality is that while we appreciate the assistance and the support of the PTOs, we're not their bank. And we can't take their money and hold it in our accounts and then spend it when kind of as we see fit. We need them, if they're going to give us something, they have to go through the regular channels to donate money to us in the same way that the Arboretum was in the prior discussion, and make it very clear what the board is accepting and what the board's obligations are in accepting that in terms of what they owe back to the PTO. But we cannot take their money and hold it for them in the bank. And in that case, we've been doing that, and so we're obviously giving that money back. We're not taking any money from the PTOs or from students who are actively using this money. We're not stealing money from kids.
Does that mean that the PTOs should be basically notifying us of every donation they make, and we should be approving them as a board?
Technically, according to policy, that's exactly what it's saying. We should be documenting it. There's a dollar threshold that I can't recall off the top of my head.
Right.
But essentially, there's just many small donations that the PTO makes, and we need to record each of those donations, but when it gets over a certain dollar amount, the Board of Education must accept that.
So when you're all done with all this and after all your time and all that, a lot of these accounts will be off the books.
A lot of these accounts will disappear.
Okay. And it'll be cleaned up, then there'll be a procedure to the principals to make sure they inform the clubs or coaches or whoever on how the money has to be and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. And we're working on it. It is not, and I just want to be clear that it is not clean yet, it isn't clear yet, but it's something that we're working for.
Any other questions?
No.
All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the transfers as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Stoops, second by Locke. Kathy, could you please call the roll?
Stoops.
Yes.
Blakely.
Yes.
Gaspar.
No.
Locke.
Yes.
Lowe.
Yes.
Drummond.
Yes. All right, next item on our agenda is also Mr. Lacy and the fiscal year 2016 budget.
So obviously transferring money between funds pretty much automatically triggers a requirement to amend the budget. So the budget was originally adopted for fiscal year 2016 in September. We'll amend it here in June as we finish up the year to reflect the transfer of dollars between funds and to kind of make our predictions appear a little bit more accurate than we started the year. The attachments for that budget are included there. Or the draft budget has been on display for more than 30 days at this point, so all is set and ready for the board to adopt the amended budget.
Questions on the budget? Okay. All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 2016 amended budget as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Stoops, second by Locke. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Stoops.
Yes.
Blakely.
Yes.
Gaspar.
Yes.
Locke.
Yes.
Lowe.
Yes.
Drummond.
Yes. Last item on the agenda for action is the tennis court resurfacing, I believe also in executive.
Yeah, this spring, as the winter receded, we realized that the state of our tennis courts at Batavia High School are not in good shape. In fact, you could drag your foot across them and the surface was essentially wiping away, not necessarily wiping away, but kind of scraped away pretty easily. So if you were playing tennis, you could easily strip away the surface if you were kind of skidding your feet and whatnot. And having, what we were planning to do was some regular resurfacing and repair, which would be part of the O&M budget that nobody would ever see because it's below the dollar thresholds. Actually, it would probably be around something to the tune of about $20,000, so it would just be something that we would do. But as we looked into it a little bit further, we realized that it was a bonding issue between the asphalt underneath the actual surfaces and the surface itself, and it's failing prematurely, and to simply resurface that would not address the problem. And then looking at things further, the stanchions that actually hold up the nets need some repairs as well. So the full extent of repairs exceeded $50,000, which required us to put the project out to bid. And it was not something that we were anticipating. As I said, we were planning on doing some regular maintenance to maintain the paint and the surfaces there, but the bonding has failed, and we need to do more extensive repairs.
Why did bonding fail? Do you know?
It's not clear as to why. Generally, these surfaces last somewhere between 7 to 10 years. We're almost at 8. So we should have been able to get some more time out of it, but there might have been some indications, to be honest, that we could have recognized this earlier, but it just wasn't failing at the rate that it is now. And it's become a safety concern where it's deteriorating quickly and it will deteriorate very rapidly and be unsafe.
Does our weather play a role in the tennis courts? I mean, because we can't predict our weather, but, with salt and snow and freeze, does that affect the courts?
Yeah, certainly, and that's one thing, this winter was especially hard on those courts, so that could be part of it, but it could have been something when the courts were originally installed, maybe the conditions weren't right, or it wasn't done properly, or the chemicals weren't mixed in a proper way. There could be a whole host of variables that it would be impossible to ascertain accurately.
Can you give a quick overview when we have a capital project like this that ends up exceeding so greatly what we expected, what the process is? I'm assuming you don't just throw an extra $77,000 in the budget and try to do this.
No, we don't. But fortunately, we have some room in our capital budget this year. Pat and Mark looked very extensively at our health, life, safety plans and realized that a significant chunk of that work could be done in-house, especially some of the electrical in terms of relocating exit signs and the door closures and locks and stuff, those are things that our maintenance staff can do, given enough lead time and planning. So that's what our maintenance staff is focused on this summer, is getting as much of that health, life, safety work done in-house, rather than having to contract that out. And we're going to use that savings and apply that toward this project.
If we hadn't had that savings, what would you have done?
If we didn't have that savings, then we would probably be cutting projects off our capital projects list.
Okay, that's just a normal process, right?
It would kick other things, it would basically kick things down the priority list.
That's what I assumed, but I just wanted to clarify to make sure I included.
And this isn't being brought forward because, I'm just gonna say, this has nothing to do with the turf. This is because this is not in safe condition, correct?
It is absolutely nothing to do with it.
And that puts our students at risk, correct? You just gotta say it.
Do we know
People find a way to
anything
get
about
Say it.
this company's track record on this type of a court that they're going to put down?
Yeah, the team, Mark and Pat, checked references, and 3 references were very positive. So people were very positive, so.
Is there like a warranty?
I don't think there is a warranty, no. But off the top of my head, I'm not certain, but I don't think so.
So we don't have to do anything with the fence around it or anything, right?
So
So if we approve this and it
they
moves forward.
install it
what's
and a
the
month later it
timeframe?
falls apart?
That's the tricky part. Well, there aren't any guarantees with work like this in general.
But that's part of the reference checking and,
Okay.
In terms of time frame, it's important. We obviously want it would be pretty disruptive to our tennis teams, and if we do this now, this is why it's before we now, so that we can have enough time to get this done this summer before tennis practice. It's going to be disruptive to them, but they can make things work. We want to make sure that we have these ready for their competitions.
It'll be ready by fall.
Yeah.
Okay.
As Tina said about the harsh conditions or anything, is there anything that they might recommend to put like a tarp over or anything to keep up anything off of it to see if it lasts longer?
This is in my area of expertise, so it's hard to.
Are you saying you want to do enclosed
Indoor?
court?
No.
Indoor
I
court?
want indoor tennis courts.
No, I did not. Putting words in my mouth. A tarp on, like a baseball, you know,
Yeah.
to keep the snow or anything off of it.
Yeah, no, that's all I was asking. No, I agree.
That's a good question.
I thought you wanted indoor tennis courts.
Yeah. John Gaspar for indoor dome.
You can make a motion about that?
any other questions on the tennis court?
We could put a dome. You want a dome?
And on that note,
I have some questions. about
I
the
would
dome.
entertain a motion that we authorize.
How long does it take to
contract
build
for
a
work
dome?
Outlined in the bid for, with U.S. Tennis Court Construction Company for the sum of $77,800 and clarify that does not include a dome.
Well, to clarify, this is in the sum not to exceed 77, correct?
It would be 77,000, but naturally, as with all bids, it would have, we would be able to exceed that amount by up to 10% without explicit board approval.
Okay. So we have a motion?
But this is
So moved.
something where they've even, it's a pretty straightforward
Yeah, we did.
scope of work.
So moved.
There really isn't any need for.
Second.
Moved by Locke, second by Lowe. Can you please call the roll?
Being late already.
Locke.
It's okay. Yes.
Lowe,
Yes.
Stoops,
Yes.
Blakely,
Yes.
Gaspar,
Yes.
John.
Yes.
That concludes the action portion of our agenda. The last items on our agenda are administration and board comments. What is their preferences?
I do not have any comments this evening. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Then let's go to Anna too.
I have no comments.
Only thing I want to say is that I'm having a great summer of Bulldog sports. It's great seeing all the kids in the community out there being active in different camps and sports and whatnot. It's great seeing them out there, so I'm having fun watching it.
Tina. I don't have it. Jason.
Dance team, car wash is next Saturday. Buy your tickets and show up. Get your car washed by Dance Team Girls. I won't be there.
Oh, that was part of the draw last time.
I know, exactly. I was in my short shorts and the tube top.
Oh.
God. Wilson. But
That is wrong.
In his political career.
go Bulldogs.
John.
Thank you, everyone, for everything. Joanne, thank you for the information about Oak Park and so on.
The dome.
Yeah, so, and I want to thank the board today. I think we had some very lively discussions on a lot of things, and I do appreciate that, so thank you very much.
All right, and I have no comments tonight, so that would conclude our agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Everyone
Second.
to adjourn. Moved by Steve, second by Locke. Can you please tell us?
Yes.
Lakeland?
Yes, 8:04.
Jasper?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes.
Lo?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I got it.
Put it on the floor, your email.